Good morning. It's March 31st, 2019. I am your host, Faceman, your friendly neighborhood contrarian. Some people say being a contrarian is just being an asshole. And I guess you could look at it like that. I mean, I am kind of an asshole, kind of a smart ass. Oftentimes, a hard ass as well. But if being an individual and thinking critically makes me an asshole, then I'm okay with that. If that's the sacrifice I gotta make in order to find my truth, to find the objective truth, if there is one, to try to get every side of every story, if that makes me an asshole, then so be it. Okay? I am okay with that. All right. So, we've got a lot of good stories today, a lot of things to talk about. A lot of good things to talk about, some juicy stuff. Let's start off with this quick clip, which I thought was at the same time sad, but also funny. Here we've got the Pope. And as people are coming up, they're really trying hard to kiss his ring. Like he's some kind of medieval age king or some shit like that. Look at this. And he's just like... It's hilarious. These people are pathetic. He's just a man. And they are, kneeling down and kissing somebody's ring or hand, it's akin to worshiping the person. So, the Pope isn't God. And, he's probably got a lot to do with. He's probably got his hands in those pedophilia and stuff like that goes on so much in the Catholic Church. Even high level bishops and cardinals and stuff like that get caught messing with kids. And my thought is they should just allow them to marry. Why not? It's better than engaging in stuff that is clearly against their own teaching. Just makes them hypocrites. But anyways, I don't really want to talk about that too much. I mean, everybody pretty much knows things about the Catholic Church. How it's just a very corrupt organization, I would say, at the very least. We got a lot of other great topics to talk about. Next, we're going to be talking about the U.S. expands a ban on abortion-related services and aid. We talked about abortion last week. We were talking about how Beto O'Rourke, one of the Democratic candidates for president for 2020, is in support of late-term abortion. So you can check out that clip at youtube.com/TheMCFaceman. If you missed it, I edited it together into 16 minutes for you so that you can, don't have to sort through the whole podcast from last week. Some other topics from last week, we were talking about China, the Belt and Road. We were talking about the Yellow Vest movement. Macron about to give authorization to open fire on protests, and the situation in Venezuela, which we're going to be continuing talking about today. A little later in the show, there's it seems like every week there's some new kind of development going on with Venezuela. They're basically living in a post-apocalyptic time there with no power and no water, and I really don't know how people can survive under those conditions. And it just makes me feel grateful that I'm not currently living under those conditions. Although what's happening in Venezuela could easily happen in the United States if there were an economic collapse. And that's why it's important to prepare for an economic collapse. It's important to have... it's important to know how you're going to get your water, your food, how you're going to protect yourself when you're in a situation that there is no access to food in stores, and no one's there to protect you. You got to always think about that. All right, so into this.
As before, we'll continue to refuse to provide assistance to foreign NGOs who perform or actively promote abortion as a method of family planning. Now, as a result of my decision today, we're also making clear we will refuse to provide assistance to foreign NGOs that give financial support to other foreign groups in the global abortion industry. We will enforce a strict prohibition on backdoor funding schemes and ad runs around our policy. American taxpayer dollars will not be used to underwrite abortions. In light of recent evidence of abortion-related advocacy by an organ of the Organization of American States, I directed my team to include a provision in foreign assistance agreements with the OAS that explicitly prohibits the use of funds to lobby for or against abortion. The institutions of the OAS should be focused on addressing crises in Cuba, Nicaragua, and in Venezuela, not in advancing the pro-abortion cause. And to ensure that our message is heard loud and clear, we will reduce our contributions to the OAS. Our reduction equals the estimated U.S. share of possible OAS expenditures on these abortion-related activities. The American people should rest assured that this administration and this State Department and our USAID will do all we can to safeguard U.S. taxpayer dollars and protect and respect the sanctity of life for people all around the globe.
Many of the NGOs that provide health care on the ground, particularly in Africa and some Asian countries, tell a totally different story than what you do. They say that this is particularly hurtful to health care to women in the rural areas, and in fact it will lead to more pregnancies, and inevitably to more abortions. How do you respond to this? And is there anything you're doing or can do?
They're just wrong, Carol. They're just wrong about that. This argument has been presented for an awfully long time, and they're just factually wrong about that. The monies that this administration is providing for global health remain. We are working hard. We're working alongside those NGOs that do some phenomenal work. The theory that somehow not protecting every human life is destroying human life is perverse on its face.
All right, so that's really about U.S. aid to foreign governments to help them pay for abortion, like the lady said, in Africa. And by now, if you've been watching this show over the past several weeks, you would know that I'm not for foreign aid at this moment. With $22 trillion in debt, we need to cut off aid to all these countries. Get that $50 billion in foreign aid that we spend every year and reinvest that into our country, maybe help our homeless people, maybe help our poor. There's better uses for that than sending that somewhere else. Okay. And, we talked about abortion already. And I don't feel it's right to have taxpayers pay for it, because it goes against people's personal beliefs, moral beliefs, religious beliefs, and that violates the exercise of the free exercise of your religion, free exercise of speech, free exercise of opinion, and that's the first bill of, first one in the Bill of Rights. That's the first, that's the first thing we look at, is the freedom of speech. Because if we don't have the freedom of speech, we don't have anything in this country. Then we're not a free country anymore. And it seems like there's so many people that support abortion. Well, hey, man, if that's the case, you don't need taxpayer money, right? You can start your own private funds that fund abortion. We looked at last week how there's a whole industry behind not just abortion itself, but the sale of baby parts. When your baby is ripped apart inside the womb and drug out of the womb bit by bit, arm here, leg there, they're then looked at to be sold to the tissue procurement agencies. And now with late-term abortion, they could potentially have you give birth, and if you decide not to keep it, what they're going to do is try to keep it alive and sell the whole baby alive. And the thing is, once you have that abortion, it loses human rights. It doesn't, even though it's a baby, legally it's no longer a baby because you had an abortion or something like that. But this is a foreign aid issue, so I don't think we can afford foreign aid right now. Here is India becomes the fourth space superpower as it shoots down its satellite. And this is a huge message to Pakistan and its other neighbors.
दुनिया के 3 देश अमेरिका, रूस और चीन को यह उपलब्धि हासिल थी। अब भारत चौथा देश है जिसने आज यह सिद्धि प्राप्त की है।
Yeah, so they're increasingly becoming more, they're increasing their military capabilities. This could be seen as a provocation to Pakistan, as they had a recent conflict and have had conflict for years. So it's not necessarily that great a thing, in particular if their main rival does not have these capabilities. So the deterrent, it's less of a deterrent now between India and Pakistan, although they both have nukes. I think it might be debatable what this extra ability, if this really gives you much of a tactical advantage. But, India is clearly flexing its muscles. Let's get into the next topic here. What's going on? What's up, technology?
I'm Faraz Kilani, the special correspondent for BBC Arabic. I've been covering the war against the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq in the last 4 or 5 years. What's happening now symbolically is very important because it will write the last chapter of the Caliphate state, which was declared by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in 2014.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
By the end of this battle and near Deir ez-Zor, they will lose the last territory they control, but it's not the end of the Islamic State organization. The organization is still very strong in both countries, in Syria and Iraq. They still have thousands of fighters in different areas. Maybe you cannot see them controlling areas or towns or cities like before, but they're still there. And they can hit at any moment. In my last visit to Raqqa, it was clear that the city is still full of stealing cells from the Islamic State. Until now, despite we are talking about more than 15 months since they pushed out of the city is not cleared yet from them. And if you move from Raqqa to Deir Zor or the Iraqi borders, we are talking about a huge area, more than 300 kilometers. It's still the same. It all started in Iraq in 2003 after the US invasion of the country, because what happened then, the Sunni community in Iraq felt at that moment that they lost everything and the Shia took over. After all what I've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, I can say that the history is happening again. When I visit any area liberated from ISIS, when you talk to the people there, the only thing they say that it's not the Iraqis or the Syrian people who won the war against ISIS. It's the Shia militias in Iraq and the Assad regime in Syria. And that's why it will be so easy for any extremist group in the future, whether it's ISIS or another one, or Al-Qaeda or any other group, to invest again in these communities and return within a few years. When I talked to a family I met in the first house liberated in Mosul city, they said this, that it's a matter of time before ISIS return again.
يعني حتى الدواعش وقت ما طلعوا قالوا لا تفرحون بطلعتنا لأن راح يجينا يوم نرجع لكم.
So this just highlights the fact that there's no way to win this war. There's no reason for us to be there. The war on terror is just a huge sham to control the Middle East, for U.S. hegemony in the Middle East. It's just a way to bring to life the policies put together at the Project of New American Century in the late 90s, before 9/11, where they laid out the plan to topple regimes in the Middle East, including Syria. And we definitely fucked up Syria. We fucked up Libya. And the more drone strikes, the more U.S. military intervention in these regions, the more terrorists you're going to create, the more freedom fighters you're going to create. And the difference between a terrorist and a freedom fighter is very slim. It's just a matter of perspective, really. Let's say you had China coming in here, destroying our cities and like decimating our cities, decimating our economies and all this. You better believe I'm going to be in the freedom fighter movement against China. I would just, and so would many other people. No one likes being conquered by foreign countries. And the thing is, the FBI heard about the attacks on the Twin Towers before 9/11 even happened. They've heard the name Osama bin Laden before 9/11 even happened. They were aware of him. In fact, we talked a little bit about this before, but Mueller helped. The same Mueller that conducted the special investigation on Trump actually helped cover up 9/11. He helped Osama bin Laden's family escape the country at a time after 9/11. For a short period, all the planes were not allowed to go anywhere. All the planes were grounded, but they still were able to fly out the bin Laden family. And 9/11 was a perfect excuse to start this war. It was the perfect excuse. When analyzing world events, the number one question you need to ask is who benefits? Who benefits? It doesn't look like the Syrian people or the Afghani people or Iraqi people or any of these people would benefit from attacking the United States as we see what's going on right here. There's no reason for them to try to attack us. And we have the intelligence capability already to detect things happening and prevent them from happening. As I've discussed before, we need to conduct win-win deals and diplomacy with foreign countries so that we're on good terms with them, so that we have like an interdependent nature instead of a antagonistic nature, instead of having rivalries. If the Shia and the Sunnis, they want to war till the end of time, let them. Just let them. If they want to kill each other, let them. It's none of our business. We need to stop trying to be the policeman of the world. We can't afford it. We cannot afford it. And on the flip side, the danger is that, if we're not interjecting, then Russia or China will interject to try to put their imprint on the country. But that just goes back to the win-win deals. We got to set up deals that help the countries. Just not militarily. We need to stop sending our people out to war. We need to stop dropping $1 million bombs on shacks and killing civilians. Trump is continuing the drone war. It gets worse and worse with every president. Become more militaristic, more power hungry. And we're going to get into a lot of trouble if we don't drastically change our foreign policy. The Monroe Doctrine is still in effect. Our foreign policy hasn't changed for a long, long time. We need to stay out of everybody's business on the military front, and we need to rather work out better economic deals that benefit us and benefit other countries. That's what China's doing with the Belt and Road Initiative, although what they're doing is spending a lot of money and then having countries indebted to them. That is not in the best interest of those countries in the long run. That just benefits whoever's in charge, in the short term. So, other stuff that's going on in the Middle East, since we're talking about the Middle East, the ongoing conflict in Israel, in Palestine. Here's some Gaza Rockets strikes a home in central Israel. Okay. So this has been an ongoing thing with Hamas and whoever else attacking Israel, but then Israel attacks them. There you go, some bombing in the Gaza Strip. And this just keeps going on and on. This just keeps going on and on. And we need to stop funding Israel. Israel gets the most of the foreign aid. They get most of that $50 billion. We need to get out of there. This relationship with Netanyahu is not good. It's really cringy to see Trump lick Netanyahu's ass. Okay? Netanyahu is a Zionist. Okay? What he wants to see is the Palestinians gone. He wants to basically wipe them all out. And it's just a very progressive, little by little. I mean, if you could look at maps that show the Palestinian territories shrinking and shrinking over time. the UN and England basically handed over what used to be called Palestine to a small group of Zionists. And when I say Zionists, I don't really talk about it like in a religious sense, but like in the sense of like there's this group of people that they just want to dominate. The Rothschilds are included in that. They're Zionists. And I feel like there's this sick relationship between United States and Israel where they have a lot of control over American politics. When Ilhan Omar spoke out against Israel, you had Republicans and Democrats chasing her down because AIPAC, the lobbying group, the pro-Israel lobbying group, gives our politicians a lot of money. But then we send a lot of money over there too. So it's I don't know exactly what the hell is going on with that, but it's not looking good. It's not looking good. We shouldn't be so eager to help them kill people and fucking displace people and all this. We have no business over there. Let them be, okay? Let them handle themselves. I'm really tired of our government being beholden to other governments in other countries. We need to worry about this country. And Trump has gone even further in recognizing Israel as having the sovereign right over the Golan Heights, which is a region in Syria.
Today I am taking historic action to promote Israel's ability to defend itself and really to have a very powerful, very strong national security, which they're entitled to.
And this has angered other Muslim nations in the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia, which is usually on good terms with Israel.
The state of Israel took control of the Golan Heights in 1967 to safeguard its security from external threats. Today, aggressive action by Iran and terrorist groups in southern Syria, including Hezbollah, continue to make the Golan Heights a potential launching ground for attacks against Israel. Very violent attacks. Any possible future peace agreement must account for Israel's need to defend itself from Syria, Iran, and other regional threats.
Yeah. And so like some people argue online, they say, hey, what makes Palestine legitimate? What makes Israel legitimate? Some say the standard is, well, if you can protect that area, if you can take that area and protect that area, then it's yours. And some say, well, if the UN recognizes it, then it's legitimate. But what makes the UN legitimate? We didn't vote for anybody in the UN. We didn't, there was no election for the chairman of the UN. No, that's decided by, I think, the leadership of whichever respective government. So while we might elect the people that decide who go into the UN, we don't actually elect them directly. And the UN is really just global government. It's global government. It doesn't have sovereignty over countries, but in some ways it does exert power over other countries and forces them to do different things. So I think I don't know. At the end of the day, if you get conquered, you get throughout human history that's your land. So maybe we should just stay out of it. Let the Palestinians and the Israelis fight it out, and whoever wins, wins. And I don't know, man. It's really so much has been wasted trying to solve that conflict. I think if we just cut off Israel as far as military aid and other kind of aid, you know, let them figure it out. Let them figure it out.
Hey, NBC News.
There are two ironies that we would be remiss not to mention as we begin this newscast on this particular day. They are both painfully obvious, as my mother would say to anyone who can see two fingers in front of her face, or as she would say, dos dedos alante la cara. One, while our corporate media devotes so much of its time accusing Russia of trying to influence our election, the Trump White House has been openly, if not blatantly, if not proudly, not just influencing, but literally installing a new president in another country, in Venezuela. And the media reaction to that has been crickets. Two, while our corporate media has been describing the powerful, powerful influence that President Putin wields on Mr. Trump, the Trump administration has increased recon flights over Russia, increased sanctions on Russia, canceled treaties with Russia, all while giving Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu just about everything he wants or could ever want. No questions asked. Media reaction? Crickets. This morning, the trend continued. In a move that will likely reverberate for decades to come, the Trump administration came through again, officially handing over the disputed Golan Heights region to Israel, proving, as critics may be charged, that whatever Bibi wants, Bibi seems to get. This move by Mr. Trump is no doubt making him the belle of the ball at the annual AIPAC conference today. AIPAC, for those of you who may not know, is arguably one of the most powerful political lobbies in the United States. It represents the interests of Israel. RT correspondent Dan Cohen is there live. Dan, what's the reaction?
So this is a very good point. The liberals in our country want to harp on this Russian collusion thing. The investigation was concluded. They found no collusion. Liberals are still hoping, oh, maybe when they release the full report, we'll see what's really going on. But then what happens if when they release the full report that there's nothing to be found? What happens then? What happens then? What do you say? Oh, well, I guess we'll do a congressional investigation. And listen, I'm totally fine with holding people accountable. But if you're investigating for 2 years with the resources that you have in the government, with the technology that you have in the government, and you don't find anything, I wouldn't recommend continuing, especially since the term is almost already up. We're going to have elections next year. What this screams to me is that Democrats are scared that they aren't able to win the next election. And the sneaky tactics that they're trying to do really makes them look kind of bad, you know what I mean? So, but what the hell was that? So between these investigations and like the basically monolith mainstream media attacking Trump on a daily basis, and don't get me wrong, there's things to criticize him about, but if he breathes wrong, he gets criticized, and that just makes him look like a martyr. So if you don't understand that simple concept, then I'm sorry, you're a fucking idiot. If you go out and publicly demonize somebody, they're gonna just embolden themselves and reinforce. They're gonna dig deep into the ground, and they're gonna become a more formidable foe. And so, I think Democrats are very scared that their party won't win in 2020. And they probably should be worried. Because they've tried so hard and have basically come up empty on trying to get this guy Trump. And he's a billionaire. There's undoubtedly something he's done wrong. You know, when you get that kind of money, you've done something wrong. But so has every other president. So you got at some point, you know, with the current system that we have, you kind of have to be like, okay, well, what's better for the country? Are we going to just try to get this guy? How does that help our country? I mean, if Pence takes over as president, is that going to be better? Okay, maybe impeach Pence too. Okay, if Pelosi's in power, is Pelosi going to be better? There's so much similarity with all these presidents. They all want perpetual war. They all support Israel. It's only certain personal issues like abortion and immigration that divides the country. And more, the divide is on a personal, emotional level, which is not good for the country. We need to be accountable and responsible and really understand the impact of our decision making. The Democrats support bringing in as many illegal immigrants as possible. And you know why, though? Because they want them to be able to vote. They've talked openly about having illegal immigrants voting. And will someone from another country necessarily have our best interests in mind? Are they really going to think about the impact of offering welfare to whoever comes here and supporting people when they have kids here? I'm the son of 2 immigrants who came here legally. My father from Romania, my mother from the Dominican Republic. They did everything legally. Okay? And then the same Democrats will say, oh, well, our country's getting overcrowded. Stop having kids. Like AOC says, hey, maybe we shouldn't have kids. When the United States population is not growing enough to even replace itself. U.S. fertility rate just hit a historic low, Vox. U.S. women are having fewer and fewer babies. Of course, this being a liberal publication, they say it's a sign of progress. U.S. fertility rate is below level needed to replace population. The thing is, it's overcrowded in cities because that's where all the jobs are. People are running over there. You know, the people with degrees and stuff, they're running to the cities. And if you're in New York City, you can see that it's overcrowded. You got fucking Tom, Dick, and Harry from Oregon and California, whatever, coming in here. And, taking jobs away from native New Yorkers like myself. Meanwhile, you've got factories like this one factory that creates fire hydrants that is actually desperate for workers. Factory workers. Let's see if we find this. Okay, can't find it on YouTube, but I do remember reading that article. So anyways, yeah, let's continue with this.
Ulrich, this is APAC 2019, where there are about 18,000 people gathered here to support, the U.S.-Israel relationship, and specifically the diplomatic, economic, and military support the U.S. gives Israel in about $3.8 billion per year, which is $120 every day. Now, Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, just finished his speech a couple of minutes ago. Take a listen to what he said.
Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, and any nation that espouses anti-Zionism, like Iran, must be confronted. We must defend the rightful homeland of the Jewish people.
So there we heard Mike Pompeo denouncing anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism. Anti-Zionism happens to be something that many secular and progressive Jews believe in, as well as Orthodox Jews for religious reasons. We've also heard a lot of condemnations of Ilhan Omar, the freshman congresswoman, for her alleged anti-Semitism. The Vice President Mike Pence denounced her today, as have a host of other people all around me. But take a listen to what Steny Hoyer, representative, had to say about dual allegiance yesterday.
I stand with Israel proudly and unapologetically. So, ladies and gentlemen, when someone accuses American supporters of dual loyalty, I say, accuse me.
So Ilhan Omar says she shouldn't have to declare loyalty to Israel, and she's called an anti-Semite. Meanwhile, Steny Hoyer declares his loyalty to Israel, and he's considered a good congressman.
First of all, Pompeo, who once called Guido, just called Zionism Simonism. So just for the record, this guy's got a problem talking. But
Simonism.
Let's put that aside. Any human being, any American who just heard what our Secretary of State said would be a little put off, right? I mean, I guess it all depends on how he defines anti-Zionism. If he's saying, if you don't believe Israel has a right to exist, you're an anti-Zionist, I may actually agree with him. If he's saying, if you don't agree with Israeli policies, you're an anti-Zionist, I think he's crazy for saying that.
Well, I think he's talking about, the idea of maintaining a Jewish demographic majority in a land where there's actually not a Jewish majority of people. There's actually more than 6 million indigenous Palestinians and many who live in refugee camps around the region, and it's engineered through this military aid, which AIPAC ensures is coming, Rick.
I'm just wondering, did anybody question him or ask him when he says, if you're anti-Zion, you're not American? I'm still not sure what he was trying. What's the normal definition when someone says you're an anti-Zionist? Do they mean that you just can I disagree with an Israeli policy? Does that make me an anti-Zionist?
Not necessarily, but it certainly can. I mean, there are many anti-Zionists, Jewish, not Jewish, Palestinian, from people all around the world. And as I said, including many Orthodox Jews who disagree, who are anti-Zionists for religious reasons. So he's throwing, a lot of Jews even under the bus with that comment.
Yeah, I've never heard a Secretary of State say something like that. Maybe it's all about the definition, and I want to give him the benefit of the doubt of what he meant by that. So that's why it's important to have these discussions. Thanks, Dan. Good job. Good job out there. Hope to see you.
And here we go with a quick video of Jews who are against Zionism.
Our fight is not with guns. Our fight is to wake up people and to make them think. We believe strongly that the state of Israel will come to an end. We have God on our side.
We're in Stamford Hill, a Jewish neighbourhood in North London. We're here to meet the UK branch of the controversial ultra-Orthodox Jews of the Neturei Karta. These guys campaign against Zionism and for the immediate dismantling of the State of Israel. Many find their stance mind-boggling, and they're pretty unpopular.
Imagine that. Jews wanting the dismantling of Israel. Think about that for a second.
Especially among other Jewish people. They're often labeled as extremists for hanging out with Iran's former president Ahmadinejad and far-right nationalists from Hungary's Jobbik party. I want to find out why the Neturei Karta are so driven by their convictions that they're ready to be alienated by their own people. So when one of their leaders in London invited me into the secretive community, I jumped at the chance.
I think that's him. Hi.
Hello, hello, hello.
I'm Milan.
Yes, my name is Rabbi Beck.
How big is the Neturei Karta here in Stamford Hill?
The fighters against Zionism here in Stamford Hill is several hundred. But people what they are anti-Zionist, there are thousands here in Stamford Hill.
Zionism is the belief that Jewish people should have their own nation. The movement gathered support through the early 20th century, and the State of Israel was established in 1948 in Palestine. Right from the start, Haredi Jews, known as ultra-Orthodox, voiced their opposition. Not only did they fear the rise of secularism, they also believed Jewish people shouldn't have their own state before the coming of the Messiah. Over time, some ultra-Orthodox groups softened their attitudes, and they began to enjoy the benefits of Israel. Others have maintained their opposition. And on the most radical end of the anti-Zionist spectrum is the Neturei Karta.
I will put in paper in the machine. I'm going now to print out.
Rabbi Beck is keen to get his message out, so he's invited me to tag along on a flyering mission around Stamford Hill.
So is this your friend who's arriving?
Yes.
His protege, Rabbi Blyer, was coming along too.
You have a very nice motorbike.
Oh, thank you. This is one flower. This is mostly explained why we are against the State of Israel.
Do you find it important to go around and distribute this?
Israeli propaganda is so strong. So obviously we feel obliged to do the opposite.
Sorry if you can see it inside. He will see it here.
So I go at the very back?
Yes, I'm very sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
Step into my van.
So how do you two know each other?
He was a teacher in school. I was a child in the same school. So I know him already as a kid. He was very famous as a child.
Do you deliver flyers like this to make more and more people aware of your existence?
Not of my existence, of the existence of the Torah. We are the Neturei Karta guardians of the city. We try to guide people what is the right way in Judaism. Like if the woman going dressed not so modest, or there's some shops where they sell things not in the Jewish style, we call them, look, please stop it. You're not allowed here in our neighborhood. Of course, sometimes they get angry, but they understand that in the end of the day, we are right. If you don't like it, okay, goes to other places. Nobody forced him to leave here. I feel it for my duty in my life to teach people in the right way.
And what is the right way?
You want me to teach you Judaism in 1 minute?
Can you?
Thank you. Have a good day. Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, going to park here. Hard parking.
Okay, get on with it.
Rabbi Beck, I think you might have driven into the car behind us.
Rip it off and we have to put it again. You can see also they put here on the door the Star of David. We painted already down, but what we can do. Just 1 minute. The English workers, right?
I never in my life thought I would see the inside of an ultra-Orthodox synagogue in Stamford.
Okay.
A few times. Sometimes thrown stones on the window and I have to...
Anyways, you get the picture. You know, clearly Vice has its own biases and tries to, whenever it covers something, it kind of, you know, includes certain things that may or may not support an argument. Obviously, this is a fringe movement, the AntiZionist Jews, but that's just to show, that's just kind of to show you that there are even some Jews that are not They're not for a Zionist state. They see what the state of Israel has done to the Palestinians, and it goes against their religion.
When you get back, thanks. I'm Rick Sanchez.
New reaction tonight. The wife of a leading Venezuelan freedom fighter kidnapped by the socialist Maduro regime is now speaking out. Roberto Marrero is the chief of staff to the man the United States recognizes as interim president of Venezuela, Juan Guaido. Marrero was taken from his home in Caracas and has been held hostage by Nicolas Maduro's thugs for 4 days. Some say the kidnapping is Maduro seeking to provoke the United States. Marrero's wife, Rami, spoke exclusively to Trish earlier today. Watch.
Romney, thanks so much for joining me. I know how difficult this is and what a difficult time it is, obviously, for you, for your family, and certainly your husband. Describe to me what happened to him.
Well, my husband has been kidnapped for 4 days today. He was at home, and suddenly the police forces of narco regime of Nicolas Maduro take by the force in the whole building, and they raided my house and even my neighbors, and they planted guns and they destroyed my house, and they invent something, and this is something illegal procedure they make in my house and in my building.
Now, you sent me the picture of your husband, and you can see Maduro's people in the background all dressed in black, and I can see the guns in front of your husband and the weapons and the cash. So those weren't his guns, those weren't his weapons, that wasn't his money?
No, he doesn't. No, not at all. He doesn't have any guns, not even nothing. They just planted. He's a human rights defender. He's been a man who has struggled for democracy for many years. He's founder with Leopoldo Lopez and Carlos Vecchio of Voluntad Popular Party, and he's been such a known man for democracy and for freedom. They just planted.
He's in jail now. Maduro took him. You know, it's obviously, and your husband had a very big role in this fight for freedom, as he was Juan Guaido's chief of staff. They can't get Juan Guaido because I think many countries have made it clear that that is just unacceptable. So do you think they were going after your husband instead?
Absolutely. I think they took my husband because they know that if U.S. said that if they touch Juan Guaido, they would be the stronger actions. So they take my husband to see what's the reaction of the world. Juan Guaido has been recognized for more than 60 countries around the world. My husband was with him during...
And they say that Guaido has been recognized, but we talked about that in a previous episode of the show, that there's a lot of countries that actually don't recognize Guaido. It's mostly Western countries that recognize Guaido, that Guaido is kind of like a newbie in the political scene there. You know, that a lot of countries in Africa, for example, do not recognize Guaido. And it's mostly, white-led industrial Western, allied to the United States countries that recognize Guaido. And this event here is somewhat questionable. It's possible that he was abducted. I believe he was arrested by the regime. It's possible that those guns did belong to him. It's possible that they were planted. I mean, it's hard to really know what the hell is going on in Venezuela. We know that Maduro is corrupt, and Venezuela deserves better leadership. But also, they don't deserve to have a puppet like Guaido come in and, basically just, it's not going to be good for the country. Historically, whenever the United States installs a puppet, the country does not really benefit from that transition.
Tonight, there are reports.
Something new, something else happening in Venezuela.
That 2 Russian planes have arrived in Caracas, Venezuela. All right, I'm going to show them to you. There they are. They're being described as a IL-62 passenger jet and an AN-124 military cargo jet, both with some type of military contingency to them. Hint, hint. Now, remember that just 3 months ago, Russian troops joined Venezuelan troops in some military exercises. Rachel Blevins has been following this story for us throughout the course of the day. Here's what is kind of tough to figure out at this point. What do we call this sudden Russian presence there in Venezuela? What is it?
Right, so reports are claiming that 2 Russian Air Force jets arrived on Saturday and that they had around 100 troops and 35 tons of equipment. So Russia's coming out, and their diplomatic sources in Caracas are saying that they are just there to fulfill agreements that they've had with Venezuela, and that's kind of the most of an answer that we're getting right now.
Interesting timing, though, right?
Exactly, but the Russian Ministry of Defense has not addressed this, and they haven't said anything about it. So right now we're just going off of these diplomatic sources in Caracas and what they're saying so far.
So it's being described as a quasi-military diplomatic presence in Venezuela, right?
Exactly. They're saying that they're there to support the government of Maduro at a time when you have the United States saying that they want Maduro to resign, and that all options are on the table.
So that sounds good. But how much of this is really about sending Uncle Sam, sending Washington a message? We know what you guys are doing here. We understand your intervention. We just want you to know that we wear big boy pants too.
Right. It definitely seems like they're saying it without actually coming out and saying it. And it's notable, too, that opposition leader Juan Guaido, who is the United States is supporting in the region, now he's coming out and he's telling the media, well, any day now, the military of Venezuela is going to come and support me. Any day now, they're going to turn away from Maduro. And so he's trying to say that Maduro's days are numbered. But it's interesting to see that Russia is now increasing their presence there, because it really makes you wonder how much of what he's saying is true and how much of the military really does plan to stay and support Maduro.
You know, to be fair, I think to our audience who may not know this, we should not make it seem like all of a sudden Russia just showed up in Venezuela. Russia has had a long-standing relationship with Venezuela for several years now, right?
Right, exactly. And I think it's notable now, too, that the media here in the United States is talking about it more now, because Russia is one of the countries that is standing by Maduro. And so they can take, you know, the bad guy that they like to talk about a lot, and they can now pin it with Maduro. And now suddenly they've got all of that together at a time when the United States is trying to get everyone to support the opposition leader.
If this were a chess match, I think both sides would be saying we're far away from checkmate at any point. And by the way, we got a strong hand as well. I know I'm mixing my metaphors there, but I think viewers know where we're going. Thank you, Rachel. Good.
Yeah, so a couple of Russian military planes landed, a couple hundred soldiers landed in there. And we had talked about, like, you know, if we don't set up diplomacy with these countries to have win-win situations, then that opens the door for Russia to come in there. So if we really don't want Russia in Venezuela, the answer isn't to install a puppet. It is to, you know, make the best deal that helps Venezuela, but also helps the United States. We get, you know, we at least used to get our oil from Venezuela, I think up until we started producing way more fairly recently. Yeah, this is being considered a provocation by our government, as you can see in the next video here.
Steve? Mr. President, what sort of complications does the Russian involvement now pose?
Russia has to get out. What's your next question?
Mr. President, are you thinking of increasing pressure on Venezuela, and how will you do that?
Say it.
Are you thinking of increasing pressure on Venezuela, and how will you do that?
Well, they've got a lot of pressure right now. They have no money, they have no oil, they have no nothing. They got plenty of pressure right now, so we'll see. They have no electricity, and other than military, you can't get any more pressure than they have. Unfortunately, a lot of people are starving. They don't take the aid. Maduro won't take aid. We've sent hundreds of millions of dollars worth of aid to the border. He won't take the aid. He'd rather have his people starve than take the aid. I don't think that's good, even from a political standpoint. Even from a dictator standpoint, I don't think that's good. But there's a lot of pressure on them right now. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. All options are open. Just so you understand, all options are open. Venezuela was a country with tremendous potential and is still a country with tremendous potential. But people are starving, they're being killed, they're being beaten. What's going there is unfathomable to everybody that sees and everybody that gets reports. We're getting reports that are horrible. The potential of Venezuela, if done properly and with democracy, would be incredible. It was one of the richest companies, certainly one of the truly rich countries of the world, and now it's one of the poorest countries of the world. You look at what's happened. Despite oil, the oil's not coming out. Everything's broken. They have no water. They have no electric. The lights are out. In fact, I understand just today they had a big blackout. So we're very much in contact with your husband and with everybody else, and a lot of things are happening. Many things are happening.
Y queremos alertar al mundo de los posibles continuos atentados en contra del presidente Juan Guaidó, de la ola de represión y detenciones que ha tomado niveles agresivos contra el entorno del presidente. Atacar a su entorno es atacarlo a él, pero nada lo va a detener.
My Spanish isn't too good. She said something about aggressions on whatever. In any case, so, you know, Trump being the, you know, the kind of person to strong arm people, he made it clear that all options were on the table. You know, very dangerous provocation to Russia. I do feel that him and Putin have a good relationship, but the thing is, there's so much political pressure from the left to demonize Russia, which is why Trump has to put sanctions and all these things on Russia, which in a lot of cases is not the best idea. We should be on better terms with Russia, and we should be trading with one another. I don't see Russia as a real threat. Yes, they are a nuclear power. Yes, they have they have a military, but they have a smaller GDP, gross domestic product. I believe that's basically GDP is the representation of how strong your economy is. If you didn't know, I'm not an economist myself, so that's just my rough explanation of it. But Canada has a higher GDP than Russia. Okay. We don't have to worry about Russia. Russia is trying to build itself up right now. It's trying to, you know, manage its country with its own issues right now. China is the number one foreign threat right now, in my opinion. So to antagonize Russia is not a good idea. I think Putin kind of sees through this kind of dynamic that you know, Trump has to kind of do certain things in order to you know, convince Democrats that he's not working with Russia. And you know, Democrats in their criticism of Trump and his you know, relationship with Russia, they should acknowledge the fact that we are, you know, he is enacting a lot of sanctions, and you know, he's not exactly doing everything that is in favor of Russia. So I think it's, you know, I think the left are kind of pushing for a dangerous foreign policy strategy when it comes to Russia. But speaking of Trump, here's an update about the Mueller report.
I certainly believe there is rapidly growing sentiment on the committee for a subpoena. Remember, we're not asking for the Mueller report the way a child asks parents for ice cream. That's not we are demanding that the report be turned over to us because we are entitled to it as a matter of law. We have the constitutional oversight duty and responsibility and power to receive that report. It's got to be turned over to us. So we want the Attorney General to stop playing games with the Congress of the United States and turn over the report. He should do what every other person has done in his situation before. This Attorney General has intercepted the report. He is now saying he is editing the report, whiting it out, chopping parts of it. We don't need him, thank you, as an editor for us. Turn over the report. We'll take care of the rest. We totally know how to read the report for ourselves, how to analyze it, and then how to make sure that all of the material in it is dealt with in accordance with law. Now we're in a situation where the Attorney General is essentially trying to blockade the process of justice taking place. So it may very well be that we end up in court against the Attorney General. It just seems like it just seems like they've got every trick in the book in order to stop Congress from getting a hold of this report. But we've got a lawful right to it, and we're going to get it.
I agree that the report should be made available, and you know, I hope they don't redact half of it, which is, you know, kind of the standard practice of government, constantly hiding information from the public in the name of national security. And I think the main thing is you had this guy Mueller, who wasn't Trump's friend by any means. Okay, he wasn't Trump's friend by any means. He definitely worked with the establishment, like I said before, on covering up 9/11, and he's worked with other administrations, and you know, he's not any fan of Trump. If there was something to be found, I believe Mueller would have found it, especially after 2 years. I was debating this with someone in the YouTube comments on some other video, and they were like, "Well, Ken Starr investigated the Clintons for 7 years," and I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe it is, but okay, so because the Clintons were investigated for 7 years, should we investigate Trump for 7 years? Is 7 years enough? What if in 7 years you don't find what you're looking for, Democratic Party? Should we investigate for 10 years, 15 years, 100 years? Maybe we set the precedent that we investigate everyone for 100 years. I don't know, man. Like, there has to be a certain limit to it. Like I said, you know, it's likely that he does have some skeletons in his closet, just like every other politician. So the bright side is like, hey, maybe politicians will get investigated more. I think Hillary Clinton should get investigated. I think she's gotten away with a lot and escaped jail time, you know, because of connections, political connections. Especially in the Department of Justice, which she, you know, built up to be a representation of her ideals and policies. So there was a clip this week that was making the rounds on social media. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez makes this rousing speech in Congress. But but in those clips, they don't show what came before it. They love to take shit out of context to prove their point. This is what's so disingenuous about partisan hacks, about partisan people who are so far in their party that they are unwilling to look at other perspectives or to even give you the full story. They're so focused on spin, on validating their point, on proving their point, that they dare not even you know, that's why you see censorship in social media. They're censoring anyone who's not subscribing to the liberal agenda. We're going to be talking about censorship a little bit further on into this episode, in today's show. But the censorship has gone out of control. Even some liberals have gotten censored for going against the liberal script, the liberal talking points. And I'm seeing the same thing coming from Republicans as well. The Republicans are becoming as irrational as the Democrats, if they weren't already. They're adopting the same bullshit tactics to try to prove their point and play these political games. So this is the full exchange between Congressman Sean Duffy and AOC.
We're having a conversation about homelessness and a conversation about money that it's going to cost to take people out of homelessness into homes. And the assessment is it's going to be $13 billion in change over 5 years. I think Mr. Laudermill made a great point that we spent trillions of dollars on the war on poverty and haven't really moved the needle. So I don't know if it's a money problem or if there's other problems we have to look at, which goes to the root cause of homelessness. But I would note that over 8 members of this committee have signed on to the Green New Deal. And the Green New Deal is one that if you're a rich liberal from maybe New York or California, it sounds great because you can afford to retrofit your home or build a new home that has a zero emissions, that's energy efficient, affordable, and safe. Sounds really great. But when you can barely pay the rent or you can barely afford a mortgage, to look at the cost increases that the Green New Deal will have on poor American families, it's absolutely outrageous. So HUD did a study, and if you're going to retrofit all of the HUD houses to match the Green New Deal standard, which again, over 8 of you have signed on to, it would cost anywhere between $66.5 billion to $172 billion. So you'll add no new housing to the stock, no new houses, you're just going to spend, what? At least 5 times your $13 billion number, 5 times your $13 billion number just to retrofit the existing stock. You won't put anybody else in a house, but you will spend $66 to $172 billion to retrofit American housing. It's outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. And I don't know, maybe my friends across the aisle forgot to put this language in the underlying bill, but it is addressed in the Green New Deal that the chair signed on to. She's a co-sponsor of it. And so I ask, if you care about the poor, if you care about the homeless, shouldn't we make it more affordable for the poor and the homeless to get housing? Shouldn't we try to stretch our dollar further to get more people with a roof over their head? More people who are working, 2 parents that are working that have a couple of kids, make it more affordable for them to buy a house? This bill doesn't make it more affordable. It makes it less affordable. So I think it's rich that we talk about how we care about the poor, but all the while, we'll sign on to bills that dramatically increase the cost of a family to get into a home. Not only that, when we're looking at saying, how do we make housing more affordable? How do we stretch the dollar? You're going in the wrong direction with this bill. And that's not to say that we can't have a conversation about how do we do things more cleanly? How do we do things more efficiently? I'll have that conversation. But the legislation that the chair signed on to does the absolute exact opposite of that. And so I think we should not focus on the rich, wealthy elites who will look at this and go, I love it because I've got big money in the bank. Everyone should do this. We should all sign on to it. But if you're a poor family just trying to make ends meet, it's a horrible idea. It's kind of like saying, I'll sign on to the Green New Deal, but I'll take a private jet from DC to California, a private jet. Or I'll take my Uber SUV. I won't take the train. Or I'll go to Davos and fly my private jet. The hypocrisy. Or I'll stump for the 2016 candidate and I'll demand private jets to fly me around the country, but then I'll come in and demand that every other American live by a certain set of standards that I don't abide by myself. And so I think we should be honest in this committee and say, let's drive down the cost of housing for Americans. And we can start by saying no to the Green New Deal, at least in the housing section. And we should take a hard look at the rules and regulations that drive up the cost of rental properties and homes that our families are going to buy that help them live the American dream. And we can push that on our states and our municipalities. And by driving down the cost of housing, making it more affordable, we help people take control of their own lives and get into houses. But what this committee has done is taken us in the wrong direction, a more expensive direction, a direction that doesn't stretch our dollar as far as it could go if we had a little bit of common sense. And so, Madam Chair, I bring this up because I'm going to vote against it. But I bring it up because I think we should debate it, because I think it's a horrible idea. And again, it doesn't help the poor. And so if you support it, you should vote for it. And you should not have a point of order. You should debate it, you should discuss it, and if you like it, and you want to jump the cost of housing, you should vote for it. With that, I am going to vote no, because I think it's a bad idea and hurts the poorest among us. I yield back.
And yeah, out of the many radical ideas in the Green New Deal, this is one of the most outrageous ones. AOC proposed in the Green New Deal, if you read the 14 pages, that every structure in the United States should be upgraded and retrofitted, or no, upgraded to be green. You know, solar panels or whatever modifications is needed. Any kind of renovation or upgrade to a home or to any kind of structure costs a lot of money. It's a completely unrealistic deal. He's talking about poor people, but also middle class. My mother owns a home, and she wouldn't be able to afford any kind of renovations. Are you crazy? Like, she's retired. She's on a pension, sure. Like, she's on a fixed income now, you know, with the pension and everything. Like, you know, she can't afford to make thousands of dollars of modifications. I mean, most Americans can't. A lot of Americans are just a check or two away from homelessness. MarketWatch.com, January 20th, 2018. Millions of Americans are one paycheck away from the street. Wanda Battle, a registered nurse for 4 decades, was hit with a $100,000 medical bill. She has visited her local emergency room on more than one occasion due to severe migraines and many strokes. Battle managed to reduce her latest hospital bill to $32,000 based on her relatively low income, but still faces $650 monthly payments for a previous $22,000 medical bill. And that's just a whole other story in general, is the scam of medical costs. And Obamacare drove those medical costs up. Matter of fact, I did my taxes yesterday, and I thought that the individual mandate that Trump had gotten rid of it already, but it turns out it was this year. And in some states, they still continue the mandate. But after I lost my job in June, I didn't even think about the individual mandate. I completely forgot about that shit. I thought maybe Trump had taken care of it or whatever. In either case, the connection didn't even come to me that, oh shit, I need to immediately get on some kind of health care. Okay. So what happened when I did my taxes? $356 I had to pay the penalty for not having insurance for not the whole year, but for 6 months out of that year. I had to fucking pay $356, dude. And I'm fucking broke, dude. I had to go on my credit card. And it's just penalizing you for being broke. Or penalizing you from making the decision that, hey, I don't need health insurance. We should be free to make that decision. It's outrageous. The article continues. There were times I couldn't work, says Battle, who lives outside Nashville, Tennessee. I have not held a job that is continuous. She had choppy health care coverage during her career. One agency told me I hadn't worked enough hours to qualify for health insurance. Sorry, trying to get the zoom in there. But I worked 3 12-hour shifts per week in that job. Although her case is particularly unfortunate, she was not one of the estimated 20 million people to sign up to Obamacare, which President Trump has vowed to dismantle. She is not alone in facing the prospect of a disastrous financial situation after an unexpected bill. Just 39% of Americans say they have enough savings to cover a $1,000 emergency room visit or car repair, according to data released Thursday by the personal finance site Bankrate. Paying for a major unexpected expense was the #1 use for savings cited by millennials, Generation X, baby boomers, and the older silent generation. Previous studies support these findings. Some 44% of people said they could not cover an unexpected $400 emergency expense or would rely on borrowing or selling something to do so, down from 46% the year before, according to a separate 2017 report. And if I didn't have such great credit, even despite being out of work for many months, I still have good credit because I saved money and I've been smart about paying off my shit. But if I didn't have credit, dude, I wouldn't be able to afford $1,000. That'd be all my money. That'd be all my cash at hand. I'd be completely broke. I'd have to sell like a bunch of shit. And that's the situation a lot of people find themselves in. And then you have this AOC coming in and saying, hey, we need to do this for climate. We need to do this for climate. And it's really such bullshit. The Earth goes through so many climate changes went through so many climate changes throughout its history. The norm for Earth is not stability. Stability is not the norm for Earth. There's been so many cataclysms and shifts, and there will continue to be. And mankind has such a small effect on any of that. It's the sun, it's our position in the solar system, position in the universe. We're not just, going around, we're zooming through space. The entire freaking solar system is zooming through space, spiraling around, blasting out. But you know what? If we do you know what we can do? We can tax people on carbon and give more money to the government and centralize more power to the government, give more power to the government. If we say, hey, there's a climate change, it's due to man-made, pollution and carbon dioxide and all this crap. So here's the clip, the response to this that AOC's response to this, and this is the clip that you see on social media, but you don't see what Sean Duffy was talking about.
Thank you very much. I am very encouraged by the sudden concern on the other side of the aisle about climate change, and it makes me feel as though our efforts have been effective, at the very least, in distancing between the dangerous strategy of climate denial, which we know is costing us lives, at least 3,000 Americans in Puerto Rico in Hurricane Maria. But aside from that, when we talk about the concern of the environment as an elitist concern, 1 year ago, I was waitressing in a taco shop in downtown Manhattan. I just got health insurance for the first time a month ago. This is not an elitist issue. This is a quality of life.
And she loves to bring that. She milks the shit out of that. The fact that she was working at a bar, she's milking the shit out of that. So she said she didn't have health insurance. Okay. Okay, what happened to Obamacare? Huh? Obamacare didn't help you out, Ocasio-Cortez? No, because these fucking policies are bullshit. These socialist policies are bullshit. No, but continue. I'm sorry.
Issue. You want to tell people that their concern and their desire for clean air and clean water is elitist? Tell that to the kids in the South Bronx, which are suffering from the highest rates of childhood asthma in the country. Tell that to the families in Flint, whose kids have their blood is ascending in lead levels. Their brains are damaged for the rest of their lives. Call them elitist. You're telling them that those kids are trying to get on a plane to Davos? People are dying. They are dying. And the response across the other side of the aisle is to introduce an amendment 5 minutes before a hearing in a markup. This is serious. This should not be a partisan issue. This is about our constituents in all of our lives. Iowa, Nebraska, broad swaths of the Midwest are drowning right now, underwater. Farms, towns that will never be recovered and never come back. And we're here, and people are more concerned about...
There were never floods before industrialization, ladies and gentlemen. Every natural disaster that happens from this point forward has to do with climate change. It's mankind's fault. Continue.
Helping oil companies than helping their own families? I don't think so. I don't think so.
I don't think so, sweetie, okay? I'm Jenny from the block. I don't think so. Fucking people who don't really understand what the fuck is being said, that who have never read the Green New Deal, who don't really follow politics, who just follow politicians because of emotion-based statements and how they look, and et cetera, they're gonna eat that shit up. Oh, it is convincing. She seems very passionate about what she's talking about. The thing is, she's very misguided in a lot of things.
About our lives. This is about American lives, and it should not be partisan. Science should not be partisan. We are facing a national crisis. And if we do not ascend to that crisis, if we do not ascend to the levels in which we were threatened at the Great Depression, when we were threatened in World War II, if we do not ascend to those levels, if we tell the American public that we are more willing to invest and bail out big banks than we are willing to invest in our farmers and our urban families, then I don't know what we're here doing. I don't know what we're here doing. So I welcome the sudden enthusiasm to address the climate. And in that spirit, I want to reach my hand across the aisle and say, let's do a hearing. Let's do a hearing on environment and housing. And I'm happy to do that, and I'm happy to bring forth and entertain that provision of the bill. Thank you very much. I yield my time.
Would the gentlelady yield?
Madam Chair.
And I'm willing to look at policy by policy to see, even from someone who, like AOC, who didn't even know the three branches of government. And, I'm willing to see what's going on with that. One thing that I do like about, that I did like about AOC, that I heard, what did she do? Something about, she supposedly pressured banks to stop funding private prisons. I'm not too sure if that's entirely true, but I'm not in favor of private prisons. I don't feel the justice system should be about profit. It should be about justice, and unfortunately, that's one of the things that government should be paying for and should be regulating. I think currently that is the best way to do it. There's some people that say private prisons are a better situation depending on where you look, and a lot of people are saying that it's not. And it just kind of makes sense to me that if you have a private prison, that of course, it's a business. If it's private, it's a business. The number one thing is going to be profit, and that things like human rights and living quality of the prisoners isn't really guaranteed And then you could say that, well, you know, the public prisons really aren't that great either on the most part. So I don't know. Maybe in some cases it works, in some cases it doesn't. But I think if we have the right systems in place, the right people overseeing the prisons, that we, you know, have a better situation. We just need more accountability. We need independent investigations into the prison systems on a constant basis, because the prisons, they make a lot of money. You know, they use like prison labor and stuff like that, and that actually happens a lot more in private prisons, from what I understand. Is the prison labor, you know, pay you like 80 cents an hour to do customer service for TWA. It was actually one of the, let's see, TWA prison labor. Let's see if we find that. TWA, the airline. So are American prisoners modern day slaves?
When slavery was abolished in America in 1865, the United States Congress created the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which essentially redefined the parameters of slavery. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist in the United States. This clause has allowed Americans to continue to enslave black people and poor people for over 150 years. Today, America has the highest incarceration rate in the world. Our jails and our prisons are mostly filled with poor people and people of color.
More people in prison than in China, which has billions. 1 billion. They have many millions. Over 1 billion people in China. Somehow we have more people in prison than this totalitarian regime, China. Let's see that. According to BBC, U.S., over 2 million people in prison. China, 1.5 million. So per population of 100,000, we have 737 people per 100,000 in prison. And in China, 118 per 100,000. And going by that metric, we're even ahead of Russia, which is another, you know, kind of like another totalitarian regime. A lot of things are nationally owned by Russia. You know, it's kind of like another shadow communist nation, although they have a lot of capitalism in there now. But, you know, it's kind of like a murky ground like China is right now. Like, it's communist. Like, China's communist, but they have capitalism in some ways. So the rate, according to the population, is even worse than in Russia. We have so many people in prison, a lot of them for nonviolent drug crimes. The war on drugs is an epic failure, as you can see with the opioid epidemic and, you know, fentanyl and stuff like that. There's studies that show if you legalize drugs, you're going to get less use. Here is just one example, and there's tons of studies and articles you can find like this. So this is from the Washington Post, which I don't really like the Washington Post, but whatever. Okay, you can find this same information from different sources. I can verify this. So following marijuana legalization, teen drug use is down in Colorado. This is from 2017. Following legalization, the rate of adolescent marijuana use in Colorado has fallen to its lowest level in nearly a decade, according to new federal survey data. State-level numbers from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health show that a little more than 9% of Colorado teens aged 12 to 17 used marijuana monthly in 2015 and 2016, a statistically significant drop from the prior period. That's the lowest rate of monthly marijuana use in the state since 2007 and 2008. They've done studies like this abroad too, like in Amsterdam and stuff like that. And it makes sense. It's human nature to go against someone telling you no. It's not just kids who are like that. That's a human nature in general. People want to be free. They want to be able to live their life. They want to, they generally just want to do what they want to do without getting bothered.
Someone is convicted and moves from jail to federal or state prison, the government now has legal access to them as a workforce. These prisoners work for almost nothing, making road signs or mattresses or just about anything the government decides. The Eastern Correctional Facility is one of the oldest prisons in New York. Here, many of the prisoners are enrolled in a prison labor program where the inmates work for far below minimum wage. Some people see these programs as a good thing, training inmates for skills they can use when they're released, while others see it as modern-day slavery.
Many of your speed limit signs, your stop signs, your no U-turn signs, all the road signs you're seeing as you drive down the road on any typical journey, they make many of them right here.
So what do they get paid?
The pay rate ranges from about 15 cents an hour up to 65 cents an hour.
What's the sort of motivation?
Even less than what I said. Wow.
Well,
I said 80 cents.
Wage
Wow.
and inmate pay rate is set by regulation, but you have to understand, a minimum wage employee in the community, that's assuming that they're meeting all the financial demands of perhaps maintaining a household, a family, and all the attendant fiscal responsibilities there. Purchasing of groceries, the housing costs, transportation costs, healthcare costs. For an inmate who's incarcerated in a correctional facility, those costs are not realized by the inmate.
For time spent within the penal system, inmates will accumulate fees averaging $13,600.
Yikes.
Their families suffer huge financial losses in lost wages. By the age of 48, a former inmate will have earned $179,000 less than someone who has never been incarcerated.
Yikes.
Every time that prisoners have gone to court seeking to be paid for their labor, seeking to be compensated for their labor, the court's response is, you're slaves of the state. Those are the exact words of court after court after court for the last 120 years. Prisoners are slaves of the state, and as such, they're not entitled to any compensation at all.
I read in Prison Legal News that companies like Victoria's Secret, Whole Foods, and Starbucks have used prison labor. Paul Wright exposed those stories. What percentage of prison labor is corporate America?
It's actually pretty small. I mean, and I think that, this may be bad for your story, but the reality is that at any given time, there's around 5,000 to 6,000 prisoners employed by the private sector in this country.
But the truth is, most prisoners aren't working.
Let me get that again.
5,000 to 6,000 prisoners employed by the private sector in this country.
But the truth is, most prisoners aren't working for private companies. They work for the government. Cheap labor keeps the prison system running. So, what are they doing?
They're doing, primarily what prisoners do is they run the prisons. So anything that has to get done in a prison, unless it's security related, usually prisoners are doing it. So they're doing plumbing, they're doing maintenance, they're doing custodial and janitor services, cleaning, they're cooking food, they're serving food. Literally anything you can think of that is needed to run a prison, prisoners do.
So the prison saves a fortune by making the prisoners run the prison.
Millions, tens of millions, yeah.
They save tens of millions.
There was a GAO report in 1993 that said it would cost prisons hundreds of millions of dollars more each year to pay prisoners minimum wage for the work that they did. So prisons are saving hundreds of millions of dollars by employing prisoners. And when we crunched the numbers, we found that the median wage in state prisons was 20 cents an hour. And the median wage in federal prison was 31 cents an hour. And in a number of states, they don't pay anything at all.
What?
Yeah, oh yeah. In Texas, Georgia, Arkansas, and Alabama, prisoners are not paid for their work at all.
Wow. Holy crap. And that is with the public prisons. So maybe I need to do more research on public versus private prisons. I mean, it could, I don't know. Maybe, I think it might just depend, but I might have to look into that more as far as, because I can see how, you know, having competition, you know, but then again, the thing is with prisons is that who are your customers? You know, customers are society, right? And the average person doesn't go into a prison to see how it's going. Like you go to the supermarket when you get your groceries. So you can see how competition works with grocery stores because you want to go get the best products at the best deals. So you go to the supermarket with the best products, the best deals. Sometimes it's the supermarket that's closest to you that you go to. But with prisons, who are the customers? You know, it's to benefit society as a whole, but we don't, you know, when people are in prison, unless it's a family member, we don't really investigate what's going on. So it's a complicated issue, I would say, at the very least. It's a complicated issue, just like most things. It's a complicated issue. There's two sides to everything. To really understand what's going on with a lot of things, you got to do some deeper research. And a lot of times YouTube isn't going to give you all your answers. But for the sake of the show, to make it digestible and, you know, more, I don't know, I guess, you know, it's just easier to show you video. And a lot of things are covered on, you know, by outlets on YouTube now. So, but a lot of things aren't, like I said. So, all right, let's move on to the next topic.
The rush to the border. Another 2 caravans.
So
now.
speaking of Trump, he announced that he might close the southern border.
Are pouring up. Mexico could stop them so easy. And you know what? If they don't, it's going to cost them a hell of a lot of money, honestly. Because they could do it so easy. So easy. And if they don't, and I'm telling you right now, we will close the damn border.
President Trump saying he will not hesitate to close the southern border as the crisis continues to grow.
So that is not necessarily in our best interest, although there is obviously a crisis going on at the southern border. There are just thousands and thousands of people storming into the country over the border. And the thing is, when ICE picks them up, the Border Patrol picks them up or whatever, and they don't have the space to put them in because they're coming in at a faster rate than we can possibly process them. The court system in regards to illegal immigration moves so slowly. And then when you got, you know, thousands coming in every day, there's nowhere to put them. And what happens is they ship them into the interior of the country. They release them and they ship them into the interior of the country. And, you know, so they're here. That's why they keep coming, because they know they can get away with it. Trump is saying to close the border. I don't think that's such a great idea, considering that Mexico is our third biggest U.S. trade partner at $557 billion. So to cut off the border would make trade very difficult because the there's a lot of trucks that go in through the entry points along the border. This would, I guess, limit it to shipping by boat or by plane, different products back and forth. But this would definitely negatively impact not only Mexico, but I believe also the United States. But I would assume that Mexico does have more to lose. Maybe this is just like a bluff. And the Mexican president or prime minister, whatever you call the leader of Mexico, he's saying like, hey, we're going to stop supporting these caravans. We're going to try to stop them when, at our border so that they don't get up to the United States. We understand that this is a huge crisis. And really, if Trump wasn't such an asshole and said that Mexico was going to pay for the wall, maybe Mexico would have been this cooperative from the beginning. Maybe they wouldn't have let the first caravan to come through. So, this is a big issue. And then the thing is that the Democratic Party wants to bring in these people so that they can just vote for them. And, regardless of whether you're Democrat or Republican, you have to see the flaw there in having someone from a different country vote for, vote in elections. They're going to be voting for their interests, not your interests. So it just doesn't make sense, and we shouldn't have illegal immigrants voting either, But that's something that Democrats are pushing. California law could allow illegal immigrants to vote. It's outrageous. Anyways.
Row on the border. Homeland.
Welcome back, everybody. We have some breaking news out of Chicago related to the Jussie Smollett case. I actually want to read a statement from Jussie Smollett's attorneys in full. Here's what it says. Today, all criminal charges against Jussie Smollett were dropped, and his record has been wiped clean of the filing of this tragic complaint against him. Jussie was attacked by two people he was unable to identify on January 29th. He was a victim who was vilified and made to appear as a perpetrator as a result of false and inappropriate remarks made to the public, causing an inappropriate rush to judgment. Jussie and many others were hurt by these unfair and unwarranted actions. This entire situation is a reminder that there should never be an attempt to prove a case in the court of public opinion. That is wrong. It is a reminder that a victim, in this case Jussie, deserves dignity and respect. Dismissal of charges against the victim in this case was the only just result. This is some incredible, astounding news and surprising, to say the least. Joining me now, NBC News investigative reporter Andrew Blankstein. Ann Thompson is in our Chicago bureau, and MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalos is with us on the phone. So, Ann, I'm going to start with you on this one.
So there you go. The charges dropped against Jussie Smollett. I mean, so many people are just saying, like, yeah, this is bullshit. Like, there's no way he's not guilty. Like, the police showed up at his door and he had a noose on his neck still. Like, it's such a fucking... He's a fucking actor. Of course he's going to be good at lying, dude. The police have spoken out against this decision.
So listen, I'm sure we all know what occurred this morning. My personal opinion is that you all know where I stand on this. Do I think justice was served? No. Where do I think justice is? I think this city is still owed an apology. And let me digress for a moment. When I came on this job, I've been a cop now for about 31 years. When I came on this job, I came on with my honor, my integrity, and my reputation. If someone accused me of doing anything that would circumvent that, then I would want my day in court, period, to clear my name. I've heard that they wanted their day in court with TV cameras so America could know the truth, but no, they chose to hide behind secrecy and broker a deal to circumvent the judicial system. My job as a police officer is to investigate an incident, gather evidence, gather the facts, and present them to the state's attorney. That's what we did. I stand behind the detective's investigation. I'll let Mary Manuel comment further.
One thing is not only do I support the hard work of our police officers, the defective units, but I'd like to remind everybody, a grand jury indicted this individual based on only a piece of the evidence that the police had collected in that period of time. So a grand jury actually brought the charges. I think on two things I'd like to say, or three things I'd like to say. One, on financial costs, this $10,000 doesn't even come close to what the city spent in resources to actually look over the camera, gather all the data, gather all the information that actually brought the indictment by the grand jury on many, multiple different charges. Second is what I would call the ethical costs. And the ethical cost is you have, as a person who was in the House of Representatives when we tried to pass the Shepard legislation that dealt with hate crimes, putting them on the books, that President Obama then signed into law, to then use those very laws and the principles and values behind the Matthew Shepard hate crimes legislation to self-promote your career is
Where the hell are they holding this press conference that everybody else is fucking talking at the same time as the mayor and the fucking chief of police? The fuck?
Cost that comes to all the individuals, gay men and women, who will come forward and one day say they were a victim of a hate crime who now will be doubted. People of faith, Muslim or any other religious faith, who will be a victim of hate crime. People that of all walks of life and backgrounds, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. Now this casts a shadow of whether they're telling the truth, and he did this all in the name of self-promotion. And he used the laws of the hate crime legislation that all of us collectively over years have put on the books to stand up to be the values that embody what we believe in. This is a whitewash of justice. A grand jury could not have been clearer. To then say not only is the cost, the $10,000 doesn't come cost financially, but all the other repercussions of this decision it made, to me, where is the accountability in the system? You cannot have, because of a person's position, one set of rules apply to them, and another set of rules apply to everybody else. In another way, you're seeing this play out in the universities, where people pay extra to get their kids a special position in universities. Now you have a person, because of their position and background, who's getting treated in a way that nobody else would ever, sorry about that, don't get near, I'm doing near my sermon here, that would ever get close to this type of treatment. Our officers did hard work, day in and day out, countless hours, working to unwind what actually happened that night. The city saw its reputation dragged through the mud, but I remind everybody it was not just the officers' work. That work, a piece of that work, was shown to a grand jury, and they made a decision based on only a sliver of the evidence. And as I remember correctly, somebody wanted to have that evidence in the day, as the superintendent said, their day in court, so all the evidence could be made public. Because of the judge's decision, none of that evidence will ever be made public. None of it. This is without a doubt a whitewash of justice, and sends a clear message that if you're in a position of influence and power, you'll get treated one way, other people will be treated another way. There is no accountability then in the system. It is wrong, full stop.
Do you blame the state's attorney's office?
So, and continuing on this topic, I just wanted you to keep in mind that Rahm Emanuel was part of Obama's cabinet. And here's my theory with this whole Jussie thing. I don't think it's just because he has money that he got away with it. As he just referenced now, the college admissions scandal, they caught these actresses, bribing college officials and stuff like that and coaches and things like that and having people take tests for their children just so that their kids can get into the college and have this awesome academic and extracurricular record in college. But they were found, and they were found out, and they're being charged. They will be convicted. It's everybody is has come out against that. And who is Smollett? I mean, he is an actor. This is true. He's not like a huge actor. He doesn't. I don't think he has that much pull in Hollywood to be able to affect what's going on in Chicago. I think this is tied to his relationship with the Obama family. Obama, who's from Chicago, who has a lot of pull in Chicago, at the very least because a former cabinet member, Rahm Emanuel, actually is the mayor of Chicago now. And it's possible that what he's saying right here is just a smokescreen to cover his own ass. Because as you can see we're going to get to it in the video after next, but we have another video here.
Let's bring in former federal prosecutor Doug Burns.
Okay, so this basically talks about that, even though Jussie is not going to jail, he still has to pay $10,000 in fines, and he has to pay $130,000 for the investigation. So if he is indeed innocent, then why would he have to pay? Why would he have to pay up? And now there's news that he may be suing the police department. So we're gonna see about that. And the Chicago Police Department aren't a bunch of angels either. We're gonna talk about that as well. But as far as Jussie being involved with the Obama family, here's just one little piece of evidence right here. That's Michelle Obama. And that's Jussie dancing with Obama. So he's worked with Michelle in raising money. There's like a picture with him and the Obamas that you can find online. So there's definitely something shady going on there because Obama does have a lot of pull in Chicago, especially with Rahm Emanuel as the mayor. So this is very fishy. And I think that this wasn't just, again, I don't think this was Jussie's sole decision to do this. I think he was pushed by this. I was thinking at first that, okay, maybe it was the studio execs trying to, get some more notoriety for Empire. But now that there's this connection with the Obamas that I see, then I have to think maybe it's just broader propaganda to instill more division in our society. To say, hey, these, racist people are out here preying on us, and what that does is just get people scared, afraid to talk to one another, afraid to discuss, and then, that drives people to their extremes. People go further to the right, the Democrats go further to the left. And, that's why you see censorship in, liberal-run social media and mainstream media. Mainstream media is run out of big cities, which are typically Democrat-run. Silicon Valley is heavily liberal. These are just facts. So that has implications when you have a political atmosphere that is so antagonistic, so aggressive, so combative, so partisan. And like I said, the Chicago police aren't a bunch of angels. Here's a report about Homeland Square, which is actually a black site in Chicago. And what is a black site? Well, that's where a bunch of illegal shit goes down. That's where you send people that you arrest to get tortured and fucked up and, you know, crazy interrogations. And this report talks about that.
Democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
Like, for example, Abu Ghraib is a black site.
Welcome to viewers around the country and around the world.
Abu Ghraib is you know, Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay is a black site.
We begin today with an explosive new report that Chicago police continue.
Although traditionally black sites are secretive, you know, Gitmo is obviously, everybody knows about it, but the shit that goes down that they've heard about Guantanamo Bay happens in black sites.
Operate a secret compound for detentions and interrogations, often with abusive methods. According to The Guardian, detainees as young as 15 years old have been taken to a nondescript warehouse known as Homan Square. Some are calling it the domestic equivalent of a CIA black site overseas. Prisoners were denied access to their attorneys, beaten, and held for up to 24 hours without any official record of their detention. Brian Jacob Church, who was arrested during Chicago's 2012 anti-NATO protests, said he was shackled to a bench for 17 hours without being read his Miranda rights.
When they first arrested us, they took us to this building. We were never booked or we were never processed. I was in Homan Square for about 17 hours, you know, handcuffed to a bench before I was actually finally allowed to see an attorney. So essentially, the bench was about this wide, and at the back, it had a bar that came across like this. They wouldn't unhandcuff us to sleep. So when I slept with like my hand cuffed to the bar, and I was kind of slept like this. All of our ankles were handcuffed together as well. I asked them to make a phone call. I asked, you know, to talk to my lawyers. And again, they pointed at the phone number and was like, "Oh, you're not getting any phone calls from here." And they're like, "Just tell us what we want to know and you can go home."
At least one victim was found unresponsive in an interrogation room and later pronounced dead. The Guardian says the detainees brought to the Homan site, quote, are most often poor, black, and brown.
Now, two former senior officials in the Justice Department Civil Rights Division are calling on their colleagues to launch a probe into allegations of excessive use of force, denial of right to counsel, and coercive interrogations. For more, we're joined right now by Spencer Ackerman, national security editor at The Guardian, where he's published a two-part series on police abuse in Chicago. This latest story is headlined, "The Disappeared. Chicago police detain Americans at abuse-laden black site." In his first installment last week, Spencer Ackerman reported on a Guantanamo Bay interrogator involved in torture who was also a longtime Chicago police officer known for abusing people of color. We're going to go through all of this, Spencer. Welcome back to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us more about this, about Homan.
So, you know, just this alone can show that, you know, the Chicago Police Department, there's a lot of corruption there. They don't care about, you know, the rights of citizens. So it's definitely credible for people to criticize and not trust the Chicago police. But there's so much in this Jussie Smollett case pointing to him being a liar. I mean, it's incredible. I just found out today that Chris Rock made some joke about Jussie Smollett at the NAACP Awards, which, funnily enough, amusingly enough, just offered an award to Smollett. Chris Rock, NAACP, Jussie.
How the law works when it comes to the shit just
No, Jussie Smollett.
stop him. You cannot stop a comedian from being a fucking comedian. And he went in on him a little bit. Jussie Smollett, of course, was not in attendance. But let's hear what Chris Rock had to say, and then I'll come back with my 1-2. Chris Rock, let's go.
An award. They said no Jussie Smollett jokes? Yeah, I know. What a waste of light skin, you know? You know what I could do with that light skin? That curly hair, my career would be out of here! You fucking running Hollywood! Yes, no, just... What the hell was he thinking? From now on, I ain't never gonna know you're Jussie from now on. You don't even get the you no more. That you was respect. You ain't getting no respect from me.
All right, so I'm gonna have a lot of sensitive ass.
Yeah, so that was a pretty severe roast right there, and it just, again, just adds to the point that it's just so obvious that he has not been truthful. Jussie definitely, I believe, in my belief, made that shit up. And, as Rahm Emanuel said, apparently that the judge did not use all of the evidence, which is a shame. And I think that judge should be investigated and should be held accountable for. And so now there's like a federal investigation now being conducted by, I don't know, probably the FBI, I would say. And I hope they look into that judge, because obviously there was some kind of conversation that was had, because why would this judge make this decision to block out the rest of the evidence? It just really everything just seems really fishy. Really fishy.
Facebook said today that it's extending its ban on hate speech to include white nationalists and white separatists. And this is in addition to the ban of white supremacist and white supremacist ideas that it has banned for a long time. The company previously believed that there was a distinction between these groups, that just because you're a white nationalist, it doesn't mean that you're in a hate group or that you promote violence against other groups. But after pressure from academics and civil rights groups, it decided that this is not the case, that these groups cannot be meaningfully separated from each other. If you search for terms associated with these groups, you won't get results for your search, but you'll be directed to a group called Life After Hate, and that's a group founded by former extremists who are helping people to get out of these violent extremist groups. So I think enforcement is always a challenge. Facebook uses artificial intelligence and a whole bunch of human moderators to find objectionable material, but it doesn't find everything, and people are always getting smarter at evading its detections. So I think a lot of groups have praised this new ban, but there are a lot of questions as to how Facebook is going to be able to enforce it.
Right, and hold on, I gotta pause it now. It's okay. It's like going to the next video already. Hold on a second. Okay. Okay, stop. Stop already. Okay. So as far as this ban on white nationalist groups from Facebook, so there's a distinction here. It's not supremacist groups, it's nationalist groups, people who are just saying like, hey, proud to be white. Just like, there's black people who say I'm proud to be black. There's Mexicans who say they're proud to be Mexican, etc., etc. Here's the thing with censorship, okay? Like we talked about before with, what did we talk about before as far as, well, anyways, as far as censorship, what is the impact of censorship? Okay, so maybe that the people who are offended by this, they don't see it. But here's the thing, racism is always going to exist. I personally believe everyone is at least a little bit racist, if you're really being truly honest, because it's tribalism. it's in our DNA to be wary of people from other tribes because your life depended on it before civilization, right? And there are nationalist groups of all kinds. There's pro-race groups of every race that's out there. What this does is, when you say, okay, no more white nationalist groups, what this does is those white nationalists, they're not going to just put their tail between their legs, go home and say, well, I guess I'll just, get into model trains as a hobby now. I'm going to forget about this whole white nationalist thing. No, they're going to go even harder. They're going to say, like a lot of white people have been saying, a lot of angry white people have been going on social media and saying, oh, there's an attack on white people, that, all this censorship and, all this political correctness and stuff like that is an attack on white people, and that emboldens them and radicalizes them. And then you end up with ideas like, oh, we need racial purity and stuff like that. I ran across a video, I'm not going to show it, but I ran across this video on YouTube that was talking about racial purity and saying that people of mixed race have higher rates of like schizophrenia, or they just have mental instability in general. And like they were equating Western civilization with racial purity. And I had to jump in those comments and really just like counter their argument real quick. But it's just going to radicalize people even more. And I say, hey, if you feel like somebody's being a racist, you let them speak. You know how many racists got exposed on social media and they lost their job, or like they've been publicly shunned and discredited. There's been a lot of people like that. You got to allow for the free market of ideas, and through the free market of ideas, the best ideas are going to win. Okay, so if you truly believe that these people are spewing hate, it's going to be exposed, okay? And the way to counter it is not to just say, hey, you can't speak, but to come with a counter argument. One thing I like about the Facebook ban is that when you search for a white nationalist group, it directs you to a page that is like they said, a page for reformed white nationalists, reformed supremacists who have learned from their ways. And you need to give those people attention. I never heard of such a group. Why isn't that group publicized more to help these people who have been led astray, who maybe grew up being told by their family, like, hey, white is right, and don't go messing with them coloreds and stuff like that. So we've got to allow for the free market of ideas. We can't just try to shut people out because they're gonna feel like they're being repressed, and a lot of white people feel like they are being repressed, at least in the media, and that's just going to cause more problems. You're going to have people who are moderates, and they're going to be, talking about how, this is not right, and bolstering that opinion, that bolstering that ideology. So I'm not a pro white nationalist. Obviously, I'm mixed race. I'm half white. I'm half Latino. I actually don't really subscribe to race. I never really felt like I belonged to any particular race. Was never really Dominican enough to be Dominican or Romanian enough to be Romanian. But I am American enough to be American. I believe in freedom. I believe in the Constitution. That's what this country was founded on. Western civilization to me doesn't mean white people. It means freedom. It means opportunity to, it means not living under a tyranny. That's what Western civilization means to me. It doesn't mean, oh, white people are so great, because everybody's equally capable of doing things, Even if there are some slight genetic differences between people, some races tend to be better at doing certain things than other. Like, for example, black people are usually a lot better in basketball than most people. Asians are usually better in math in science than most people. So, you know, and you might argue that, you know, some of that is culturals, you know, some of that is, you know, maybe some of that's genetic, but, you know, it's really hard to draw the line there. But we do see correlation with certain demographics. But that doesn't mean that a Mexican person can't develop fusion technology, or, you know, as you see in in Africa, there's all kinds of people living on nothing, creating innovative technological devices from garbage. You know, new ways to filter water, new ways to do different things. You know, so all races have the potential to do something great. But again, you know, in conclusion, we just need to allow the free market of ideas and stop trying to censor people, even if you don't, you know, even if what they say is abhorrent, because it's covered by the First Amendment. And again, you know, people say, well, you know, Facebook is a private company, they should be allowed to do that. You know, that's a separate argument, because Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, they have such control over technology and media that to the point, it's getting to the point where they're kind of like a public utility. Like, you can't get banned from getting electricity, for example, because it's an essential public utility. The internet has become essential to the vast majority of Americans. You can't really do much without the internet, just like you can't really do much without a phone number. So we just really have to be careful, because it's a slippery slope. When you start censoring something that's obviously bad, then it just, you know, like, oh, well, this is kind of bad. Well, this is almost bad. And then before you know it, you're censoring a lot of things. And a lot of people are silenced. On to the final story about Monsanto.
I think Brent Wisner, who is our lead counsel and did the opening statement, did an outstanding job. He chronicled 40 years of chicanery and deception by Monsanto. He laid out the science. He showed that the animal studies, the human studies, virtually all the studies that have been done, and there have been dozens of them, show that a link, an association between non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and exposure to Roundup. I don't think this case would be a good candidate for class action. This is a multi-district litigation, and you know, all of the plaintiffs, there's 11,000 plaintiffs, and they're similarly situated in the sense that they all have non-Hodgkin lymphoma from Roundup, but their particular circumstances, the injuries, the pains, the grief that they've suffered are very, very different, and they really need separate trials.
That's a good idea. I'm gonna do that.
You gotta wait to the end to find out what's gonna happen.
And what did happen? They awarded millions of dollars to this guy because the Roundup that's used, you know, as like a pesticide, is very cancerous, and it's found in different food and stuff like that. And here's some more about it.
According to Reuters, Bayer AG shares sank to their lowest in almost 7 years on Thursday after a U.S. jury awarded $80 million to a man who claimed use of the group's weed killer Roundup caused his cancer, with thousands of similar lawsuits looming. The jury in San Francisco federal court on Wednesday found Bayer liable because its Monsanto unit did not warn plaintiff Edwin Hardeman of the herbicide's alleged cancer risks. German chemicals giant Bayer, which bought Roundup maker Monsanto last year for $63 billion, said it would appeal the verdict.
I didn't even hear about Bayer buying up Monsanto. That's crazy. That is crazy. Well, they need to get that shit together because, you know, Monsanto's like the lead, not only in pesticides, but in GMOs and things like that. They're just a really awful company. Probably one of the worst companies, the most evil companies in the world. And, they really need to be held accountable for the shit that they do. So that's going to do it for today's show, Sunday morning show. Thank you very much for joining in. If you checked out the stream and if you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Please give me a like on YouTube, a comment. Please subscribe if you enjoyed the content. We have this show every week. We've been doing it for about almost 4 months now. And join in on the conversation. I like to hear what people have to say. I always respond to comments. So comment in the video below on YouTube. Please subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter as well, at the MC Faceman. And that's about it. You have a great Sunday and have a great week. Take it easy.